Many years ago in an organisational design unit, I came across a theory that posited the difference between bicycles and toads. A bicycle is complicated because if you take it apart and put it back together, it will function as a bike. But a toad is complex because if you take it apart and you try and put it back together, it won't ever function as a toad again. When you're dealing with people, you are in fact dealing with toads. And by that I mean that people are complex and irrational beings. There are a whole range of ways that individuals can react to changes in their environment, organisations, and life in general. And we've keenly seen this play out in a really powerful way over the last 18 months. Change management as a profession and a discipline has really taken a foothold over the last 25 years, particularly reflecting the amount of technical change which has occurred over the same period. Change management puts in place a structured approach that aims to ensure that changes are implemented thoroughly and smoothly. And there are a number of change methodologies available, and Cotter, Lewin, and ProSci are really commonplace to hear these days. The challenge that I've seen with traditional change management rollouts is not necessarily the methodologies themselves. Many of these are based on strong psychology and behavioural science research. It's more the execution of the methodologies focuses on the methodologies. So they focus on moving through stages rather than recognising that people are at the heart. It doesn't matter whether you've ticked off all of your checklists. If people haven't changed their behaviour, has the change really been implemented? At ThinkPlace, we're all advocates for human-centred design and have seen firsthand the significant impact it can have on developing fit-for-purpose policies, products, and experiences. But as designers, I urge you to also consider user-centred implementation as part of your design process. We often map the current state and then the desired state of processes and systems. But do we map the current state behaviours against our future state behaviours? Are we asking key questions at the design stage as to whether these options are feasible or desirable? Are there manual steps in a process which aren't captured in any standard operating procedure which provide meaning to a process down the line? Just like we shouldn't assume that we understand someone's experience without speaking to them, we equally need to provide the same due diligence when setting up implementation plans. Remember, when we're dealing with humans, we are dealing with toads. There is not one user manual, one way of taking them apart and putting them back together and having them function without issue. When considering implementation, we really need to dig deep to understand the change and what this means for an individual. This can be hard as designers to retrospectively do. We've spent a lot of time and effort doing our research, taking considerations, failing fast to design near-perfect systems for an imperfect world. Why wouldn't someone want to adopt them? Shouldn't they feel the fear and do it anyway? We've spent all this time hearing about why the current approach, policy, or system doesn't work, and then when we offer them a bespoke solution, they don't implement it? Infuriating, yes. Confusing? Absolutely. So let's break that behaviour down at the design stage. Many traditional change management methodologies start at the point that is the thing, that is the change that needs to be implemented. Cotter even stipulates to start with this sense of urgency to make things happen. This, of course, is absolutely going to make your life easier, but only if the pieces of the puzzle are actually ready to be fit together. Have you, as the designer, deconstructed all of the change and the nitty-gritty bits of what needs to change? Probably not, and that's okay, because few do. The challenge there is it's not often in our remit to do this, and it takes time to do it properly, a lot of time. People can get confused as to why the designer is asking all of these questions, or worse, worry about scope creep or think you might be trying to tack on further work to line those consultancy pockets. But this is why we really need to be asking these questions as we gather the information. Take the opportunity to shadow people undertaking their current roles. We can jump to find inefficiencies, but rather than doing that, ask the people that you're working with if these potential inefficiencies have ever been uncovered. And if so, what solutions have been considered before? What holds them back? Is it technical, process, funding? If they were to remove these barriers, what would that look like for them? What else would you have to change? These are all really important considerations for feasible implementation. So when we turn to implementation, we tend to focus on the desired behaviour that we want to see. And until we see that behaviour, the change has somewhat failed. First steps of change management. Make sure people are aware of the changes, regardless of whether they have an interest or not. But once they're all aware, then we'll move on to telling them why they should care and create that desire. Rather than taking this all or nothing approach, how can we break down our desired end state and work with homogenous groups of people to understand what success might look like for them? And then how do we break down that behavior into smaller steps to celebrate any incremental movement towards that desired state? Remember, when we deal with people, we deal with toads. When we focus on providing structure to change, we try and force the change into the complicated realm, forcing us to ignore the wonderfully complex, irrational, and challenging beings that we work with in our day-to-day. By recognizing this and acknowledging the space in which we play, we let the change flourish in its complexity. And as designers, that should be our first step to breaking down the incremental movements to the desired state, and then designing systems which positively reinforce any movement towards it.